Good morning. Changed the music this morning. That other music was so dull it made me depressed before I started the show. Just about as depressed as the word out of the UBC Senate. You know that I've been stuffing a lot of education stuff, you know, the university students who can't write when they get there after goodness knows how many years in high school. Well, the Rip Van Winkles out at the UBC Senate have finally awakened, but it doesn't mean anything. What they're telling us now is that students who can't write clear and coherent English will not be admitted to first year at UBC as of September 1979. That's gobbledygook. 3 years ago, they first decided that the standard of English, which they found in English 100 from the high schools, was so appallingly bad that they had to take up this policy of not letting them in. They won't keep to that. I'll give you $1,000 to a nickel they won't keep to that. But we'll keep nagging them, because we can't have half the university students not being able to spell or think or write or read in first year English. Enough of that dull subject this morning. A couple of very interesting people here this morning. Do you see that woman over there? That's Tonie Nathan. She was a US vice presidential candidate in 1972. She's a columnist, a broadcaster, a businesswoman, a feminist. And I'm going to tackle her on this piece of nonsense down in Oregon, from whence she comes, about the husband allegedly raping his wife. Old people like me just don't understand that. And then somebody else this morning, and a little headline about him. Do you see it? Gibson quits to help get PM elected. There he is, Gordon Gibson, Prime Minister Trudeau's closest advisor and best friend in these days of upcoming Liberal Party disasters. That's the start of the program this morning. You could have knocked me down with a feather when I saw Gordon Gibson jump into the deep water in Ottawa and swim towards the sinking ship. That's a kind of unusual reverse action. What particular guilt complex made you quit a promising future in British Columbia to go to the elbow, I almost said feet, the elbow of the Prime Minister of Canada, who is in a parlous and disastrous state despite Joe Clark's alleged bungling and incompetence? What made you do it?
Basically, I think there's a job to be done there, Jack. The immediate reason that made me do it was that I was asked by the party president and by the Prime Minister to do it.
No,
and
the immediate reason that made you do it was because you knew well that the fortunes of the Liberal Party in British Columbia, with you as its only leader and elected member, were zilch.
No, that's not right. We're having a leadership conference next month, as a matter of fact.
Any candidates?
Yeah, we got some candidates.
Name two.
I'll name one because that's the only one that's declared, and the other ones are going to have to announce for themselves. You don't take up their announcement.
Don't bother naming.
But last fall...
Would I know his name?
Last fall, I said that I wasn't going to be running again provincially, and I said that I was very interested in the federal scene. I've been looking at it. I am satisfied that I can do something useful there. So I've accepted this invitation, which I was very glad to have, to go down to Ottawa in the pre-electoral period and give whatever advice I can, do whatever work I can in conjunction with the MPs and the ministers to build up to this election.
Excellent little homily. Excellent homily. How old are you now,
Has the
Gordon
additional
Gibson?
advantage of being true.
Yes, but how old are you now?
41.
How much does the job as National Director of the Liberal Party pay?
It pays about the same after taxes as the job I just left, which is...
That's not an answer to a question, Mr. Gibson. Well, you know that well.
That was a public figure.
What is your gross salary prior to deductions?
$3,500 per month.
12 threes are 36, 12 fives are 40, $40,000 a year.
What's yours?
Mind your own business. After all, you're going into a very public job. Are you replacing the grey eminence Keith Davey?
Keith had the job about 15 years ago. Mackenzie King had it once.
But I mean right now, as a man very close to the Prime Minister's elbow, and God knows he needs advice, will you replace Keith Davey in tactics?
Oh no. Oh no, I'm just one additional voice there. There's all kinds of channels of advice to the Prime Minister and talking to people around this country. I'm just one additional.
Let me get this clear. Leader of a party in British Columbia, you are now a bureaucrat in the back rooms in Ottawa.
In a sense, for the next few months. I'm coming back to British Columbia when the election's called. I'm going to seek a nomination here and I'm going to seek election here.
Oh, it's just a temporary job.
Well, very much so. This is leading up to the election.
But there was
when the election's called, I'll be back here and I hope that I can get a nomination and then get elected.
You hope you can get a nomination. Don't be silly. Your nomination's all sewn up, isn't it?
No, it's not. Nothing's ever sewn up.
Really, God.
You got to work in this business all your life, Jack.
Okay, so you're going to be the bureaucrat in the as national director of the party.
That's right.
What kind of budget do you have there? Are you the man with the tin box?
What, you mean the person who looks for money?
Yeah.
No, I'm one of those who spends it. Other people look for money. And as far as what's the budget is there, I think I have to say that's none of your business, too.
It's going to be a lot of money anyway.
Well, as far as the campaign budget goes, as you know, this is now controlled by law. Every party has the...
There are no more tin boxes underneath the beds with cash donations.
The fundraising process is much more open now since the new law was passed, which requires disclosure of donations and complete disclosure of expenditures as well.
And a good thing, too.
Yes.
What is your first advice to the Prime Minister going to be in terms of strategy in relation to Western Canada?
Well, I think as a first day on the job, my first advice to myself is to do a lot of thinking before I give any advice. But obviously, I hope the Prime Minister is going to spend a lot of time out here in support of our candidates. And I would hope that the policies that are going to be coming out in the next election are going to be responsive to Western Canada. And the key to that is to give Western Canada a sense of involvement and clout in Ottawa.
Now, you've done this job before in a different kind of way, haven't you? Being close to the Prime Minister's elbow and one of his principal advisors. What was that job?
I was on his staff as executive assistant, the post was called. My job.
How many years ago is that?
1968 to 72.
68 to 72. So now you're back there again. At least you know your way around Ottawa.
Well, I hope so. There have been a lot of changes, a lot of new buildings.
What is the biggest single asset, said Webster, to give you an opening in which you might give me other than a homily? What is the biggest single asset that Trudeau and the Liberal Party currently has in the upcoming campaign?
You could answer that in a number of ways.
You're not going to take a cheap shot?
No, I'm not.
You know the cheap shot I'm looking for.
You want me to say Joe Clark, but I'm not going to say that.
You're not going to say that.
I'm not going to
but
say that.
He is your biggest advantage.
No, the biggest advantage is the record of the government, because that's what people are going to vote on.
No.
Of course it is.
No. The record of the government.
Why are you so surprised? We have the best record of job creation in the world in percentage terms in this country.
You got to be joking.
I'm not joking, Jack. 1962, when Diefenbaker left, 30 out of every 100 Canadians were working. 1978, 42 out of every 100 Canadians were working. You know what kind of a difference that makes to our standard of living in this country?
Did you hear the cost of living?
400,000 jobs created in the last 12 months in this country?
I don't
4% job creation rate?
accept that kind of propaganda.
Well,
I just don't accept that. I
as
know
a
how
matter of
many
fact,
unemployed there are.
People in this country know
I
that they're a
know
lot
that we've
better
got
off than they were a few years
$3.5
ago.
billion and a $4 billion deficit in unemployment insurance, which has been riddled with get-rich-quick gimmicks for years.
Big problem with the unemployment insurance has been cleaned up.
It has not been cleaned up.
Not completely in the administration. There's still difficulties. There always will be in a
Is the
program of that kind.
Oh,
But
yes.
the legislation has been cleaned.
Finally pushed through by closure.
Yes.
Not before time. But it took you years and years and years to listen to it. In the 68 campaign, the 72 campaign, I was the guy that broke the story, as you may recall, about the couple saving their UIC money to go to Hawaii for Christmas. One working, one out of work, then they would switch jobs, and they'd be collecting unemployment insurance most of the year, one of them.
You're also the guy who had the PM on the show, and the call came in from the Hawaiian, remember it?
I set it up, for which I received much public criticism. But look at the condition of the national finances. Look at the cost of living this morning, 8.4, wasn't it?
8.4, that's right.
Is that good?
Of course it's not good, but among the countries of the world, we have weathered these storms of the last few years better than most of them.
Doesn't seem like it.
Jack, we are living in a difficult world. Economically, in every other way. And as far as I'm concerned, Canada under Trudeau's done pretty well.
They never did clear up the West Coast mess on the grain ports, did they? The Americans are now standing by with their new relationships with China and their better facilities and their happier workforce, I suspect, to jump in and take away Vancouver's livelihood in grain.
Moving on that, too, 2 federal ministers, the 4 Western premiers met in Winnipeg a couple of weeks ago. The premiers were very happy, and it looks like that system's going to be fixed up a great deal, too.
So you've now closed your mind to all things provincial as far as the legislature is concerned.
I will never lose my affection for the legislature of British Columbia. It's one of the most remarkable places in the world.
More with the Prime Minister's best friend. Best friend? Second best friend. Third best friend. Closest,
After you.
second closest political advisor. Gordon Gibson, after this break. Gordon Gibson, fairly direct, but he's a great man for the appropriate political homilies. He's going to be the new national director of the Liberal Party of Canada. I'll give you a little homily. I will feel deeply, as will all other reporters in British Columbia, the loss of your directness, which you often express, and your research in provincial affairs. And you must feel just a smile. I'm complimenting you. I really feel that your conscience will trouble you about walking out of that house. You're vacating the provincial field to the lawyer fellow Stevens, who is boasting that a poll showed that he's got 15% of the potential votes. Do you believe that?
That may be the temporary situation. As we all know, when people go into the voters' booths, they behave in different ways when it comes down to the crunch and they actually have to choose a government.
Mm-hmm. But you really are giving him, he will now, if he's right, have 20% of the potential votes in the next provincial election.
No, Mr. Stevens is taking almost all of his votes, I would say, from the social credit. It's a different pool of votes than the Liberal Party has had following the last election. We came out of the last election with 7.5% of the votes, last provincial election. The Tories came out with 3.7. Most of the Liberals who were what you might call on the right side of the party, who were very worried about the NDP, went social credit last time. Mm-hmm. So that is the remaining Liberals and the new Liberals we're going to get are not good fishing ground for Mr. Stevens. He's getting his votes from social credit.
A couple of specific points. You're still deeply involved. Do you congratulate Premier Bennett on making Big Julie of Mac and Blow, Ian Sinclair, back down and not mail his offer to take over the shares of Mac and Blow for CPI, Canadian Pacific Investments? Do you congratulate Mr. Bennett?
I was very much against that takeover. I'm glad it didn't happen. I suggested one way of preventing it. We don't know yet exactly what the route was. I understand Mr. Barrett has a press conference this morning in which he says he's going to, quote, tell all about that.
10:30.
So
he's going to be on here tomorrow morning.
So we'll see what but I'm glad the takeover didn't happen.
Well, actually, Bennett's power was purely psychological power for political reasons, was it not? BC is not for sale, and while I wouldn't dare lift your forest management licenses, life might be very difficult for you if you don't have our goodwill. Is that not the only pressure he could exert?
We don't know the inside story on that.
No, but it's your opinion.
I question whether Mr. Sinclair would, he's a pretty tough cookie. I question whether he would back down just because somebody didn't smile at him.
What weapons did Bennett have to force Sinclair to back down?
There were some weapons which would have been wrong to use. For example, canceling forest management licenses.
Couldn't do that.
Can't do that. Bidding against CPI for the shares of M&B, that would have been wrong. It would have been very costly, and it would have left us owning the largest company in the province, and that's wrong. He could have, I suppose, passed this law that they passed in Nova Scotia saying that over 1,000 shares don't have any more votes than that.
Right.
The particular solution that I proposed was one that I think would worry Mr. Sinclair quite a bit, namely, if you insist on going ahead with this, we and perhaps some of the other Western provinces will get together and buy enough of the CPR stock to force you to divest yourself of M&B.
He could have done that.
He could have done that, sure.
Wouldn't have had to put up a nickel. He could buy CPR stock with his credit on margin for as much as he liked.
Absolutely, and he would never have had to do it at all because Mr. Sinclair is enough of a bargainer to back off at that point. He's not going to risk his whole empire for this one deal.
Next question. I had David Helliwell here the other morning, and I had Bennett on the other day about 5 free shares of the British Columbia Resources Investment Corporation to be delivered to eligible residential applicants by BC Day, August the 6th. Is that, in your view, a good free enterprise step or a cheap piece of buying votes among certain segments of the population with their own money?
I'm a complete supporter of it. It was me that suggested that idea during the second reading debate.
Your idea?
August 1977. I'm a complete supporter of it. They haven't done quite the whole thing correctly.
But Bennett stole your idea, and you don't mind that?
He's very welcome to it. I thought I wish he'd use more of them.
Mm-hmm. What's wrong with the way he's done it?
He hasn't given a vote for holders of just 5 shares, which is what most of us will have. You have to have 100 shares. Now, there's no reason why anybody with their shares in their hand shouldn't go to a meeting and have the right to be there and ask questions of the management and have a vote.
You could conceivably have a couple of 100,000 shareholders.
Oh, you could, but you know how it is with all widely held companies, Jack. This doesn't actually happen. But for people to say, I have the opportunity for them to say to their kids, if you don't like the way these resources are being administered, write the directors, go to the meeting. It's a psychological thing. It's very important to people to know that it's not just the cabinet that's controlling. They have a direct line.
David Halliwell conceded to me, he's a very practical man, that the moment people get their 5 free shares in their hands, long before a market is set, there will immediately become a Skiddygate beer parlour price, an Austin Hotel beer parlour price, and a Vancouver Club price. Is this a good way to handle public resources? You know perfectly well that these shares are going to be, they are worth some money, right, aren't they?
Of course they're worth some money. And this will happen in some cases, Jack, but what are you saying, that you aren't going to trust people with their assets?
I'm going to say that if these shares are going to be worth anything, they will, a large number of them will finish up in the hands of people who have other assets, and they will not become the true spreading of the free enterprise thing to people of BC.
Well, they will, because the initial distribution was made. After that, it's every citizen's decision as to what they're going to do with them. I think that an awful lot of people are going to put these aside for their children, for example.
Is it right, though, that Crown assets worth $152 million in the name of the Crown, owned by us, should be taken out and passed out to interested people, and not everybody, really?
It's owned by everybody, so to do it fair, how are you going to choose those few particular people who are going to get it? It's owned by everybody right now, and if you're going to distribute them, as they should, you have to give them to everybody and be fair.
You'll buy the full maximum of 5,000 shares eligible for you, will you?
I'll take my 5 shares.
Just 5? What about the other 5,000 you can buy at a discount?
Well, if that happens to be a good investment, I suppose a person could look at it, but personally, I'm not a person in the stock market, so.
Yeah, but is it going to be a good investment?
We'll see what price they're being sold at. That hasn't been fixed yet.
But you generally...
But certainly the free shares are a good investment.
I see
Nobody
that.
questions that.
How long will you be in this job in Ottawa?
Until the election.
That wasn't what I asked you. How many months do you anticipate your job will last in Ottawa?
I just don't have any idea, Jack. It completely depends on when the PM calls the election.
Will you quit and come west the day the writ is issued?
Yes.
That's the day you'll quit? Whether
Or,
it's...
you know, perhaps 3 or 4 days after, whatever it takes to clean up.
You've got to clean up your office, that's right, and burn your files.
Have I ever had any secrets from you?
Listen, I'm going to give you a chance to give Gordon good wishes on his new job. The phones are open. Short and sharp to Gordon, and I'm sure you will find nothing but friends in your stated objective to be one of the kingpins in re-electing that magnificent Liberal government in Ottawa. Gordon Gibson on the phone. We have a newspaper strike, you know, in Vancouver. You're aware of that?
How well I know, yeah.
Stubborn management, reactionary unions, I suppose you can call it. I understand that Fotheringham is really doing a job for the Liberal Party now that he's on loan to FP Eastern Division. See, the son is FP Western Division. He's really doing a job cutting up poor old Joe, day after day after day.
He's been filing some remarkable writing from overseas.
Don't smile.
I think some of it's appeared in the Victoria papers.
Who reads them? But I listened to one this morning about poor old Joe, and I felt sorry for him. He's got a bunch of fairly small-minded guys with him all the way around, and all they do is say he walks into the honour guard, Hussein keeps him waiting, he lost his underwear, he embarrassed the Canadian Guard of Honour, he embarrassed the Japanese. It's hardly a fair way to report. I mean, after all, when your boy travels, he travels in a Jetstar, he's got military advance guards, he's got everything arranged, his baggage goes with him, and poor Joe has really been cut to shreds, hasn't he? Do you think that'll win you in the next election?
I wasn't there, so I don't know if
You've been reading Fotheringham in the East.
So I don't know if the press was reporting things that weren't happening. I assume they were happening. It's not unusual for opposition leaders to do world tours, and I guess some work and some don't.
I won't try to get you to answer the question. Go ahead, please, to Gordon Gibson.
I'm in a bit of a quandary with regard to the McMillan and Bloedel situation, in as much as I understand that something just fractionally better than 20% of the shareholders of M&B are in fact residents of British Columbia.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
20% of residents of BC.
Why all the fuss then?
I'm not certain where you got that particular figure, sir. It's a bit hard to nail down exactly where the shareholders do live, but wherever the shareholders live, there's no question that the management lives in British Columbia. The head office is in British Columbia. The control is in British Columbia.
Has it been said that that would change?
There is no question that if Canadian Pacific obtained control of McMillan-Bloedel, that the major capital budget decisions would be made in Montreal, the major personnel decisions would be made in Montreal, and so would some of the very major operating decisions. There would be a definite shift in power. Now, some would say that doesn't matter. And I agree with Mr. Sinclair when he says that he has to have the right to invest anywhere in Canada, and any Canadian has to, or if we're going to have a country. At the same time, as a British Columbian, I want genuine control of that company to stay here if there's any way of arranging it, and it has been arranged, so I'm glad of it.
Let me tell this gentleman that it was Mr. Sinclair who said yesterday that less than 20%, fewer, to put his English, his grammar correctly, fewer than 20% of Mac and Blow's shares are registered in the names of BC residents. But I didn't particularly want to go on to that. I wanted to see what people thought of you, your new position. It's not a job, it's a position. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Gibson, just two real short questions. Is number one, in the upcoming federal election, do you think that the Quebec separation would be a bigger issue than the economy? Also, do you think there's any real threat of Western Canada potentially yapping about separation?
Very difficult to know about election issues. They're made by people, not by politicians. Politicians like to think they make them, but they don't. I hope that national unity is an important issue in the next election because I think it's very intimately linked with the economy. I don't think you can have the kind of investment and confidence in the future of this country if there's uncertainty as to it staying together.
It certainly doesn't seem that national unity is a problem for the banks. I noticed the bankers were all bowing at the feet of Parizeau in Quebec City the other day, raising money by the billions of dollars for him, great new relations between the Canadian banks. They're not worried about sovereignty association, are they?
Well, they're doing their best to promote national unity, I'd say. And the banks want to make a buck like everybody else. We sure know that.
Fair enough. Go ahead.
Yes.
Kamloops, go ahead.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
I heard you make a comment this morning that the takeover of McMillan-Bloedel by our government is unacceptable. Now, considering your family background, Mr. Gibson, and considering the fact that you come from a small capitalist logging family, I would consider you to be one of the rankest opportunists I have ever met in my life, or ever come across in public life.
Why is that?
I've never met you personally, by the way, but I'd sure like to someday. Another thing I'd like to say to you, sir, is that you made some comments this morning about job creation and the economy, the national issue. I don't think you understand any of those issues properly, except that you take up the line that the big capitalist media has taken up, and that proves my point that you are a rank opportunist, sir, and I would never vote for you, and I would never vote for your party either. I'm going to vote for the Communist Party of Canada.
Thank you, sir. You don't need to reply to that, Mr. Gibson. From all of it,
I just wish he'd explained a bit more, but...
Yeah, you're a rank opportunist. That's what he said.
Maybe you'll write me a letter, please.
I think you're pretty sharp to get out of the Liberal Party of BC. Where's this from? Oliver, BC. Speak up from Oliver.
Morning, Mr. Gibson.
Morning, sir.
I just finished reading A Legacy of Spending by Mr. Ed Murphy. Are you prepared to go to the people on that record? I will hang up and listen to your answer.
Thank you. I'm certainly not prepared to go to the people on Mr. Murphy's record. Mr. Murphy's book, of which I have read parts, and it's very difficult, incoherent reading, is not at all a good reflection of the state of affairs in this country. We just completely differ.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Gibson, yesterday we listened to Mr. Helliwell, and he stated that these shares would be worth anywhere between $6 and $7. In your honest opinion, because you're in the lumber industry, what would you pay? Would you pay the $6 or $7 for those shares?
Well, sir, I'm not in the lumber industry, and
I guess it was your dad, I remember.
yeah, and I can't claim to be any expert at that at all. Shares are worth what people are willing to pay for them, and we'll just have to see what the marketplace says when they start to be traded. But I think they're a good investment in British Columbia, and certainly any share that's distributed free, nobody's going to lose on. I know that.
No, but would you pay $6 for them?
I haven't investigated that. I haven't done the research that would be necessary to say that, and so it would be irresponsible for me to say anything else.
Let me give you some basic facts. $152 million plus accretion of profits from cancer and whatnot. Natural gas exploration prospects, many companies working on it right now. $169, $170 million breakdown value. Bennett, without committing himself, indicates the worth between 10 and 12 bucks a share. We're discounted substantially to those eligible BC residents who apply when they apply for the 5 shares. Helliwell says, while he's not committing himself at all, that they conceivably $6 or $7. You'd certainly give $1 for them, wouldn't you?
Free advice on the stock market, Jack, is exactly what it costs.
Nobody has yet committed themselves, nor can they, until Gordon says quite lucidly and properly a market is established. Correct?
That's right.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Gibson, Bennett says that BC is not for sale, and I think you agree. But he went on to sell a number of industries off, including the Grey Line franchise in Victoria. What I was wondering is, what was your position on that? And secondly, how can the federal government exempt that sale under the Foreign Investment Act when the government never sold the company? All they did was invite a company to come into British Columbia to take up a franchise.
I wish I was more of an expert on that one, sir. I'm just not. I regret the fact that that particular franchise went to an American company. I wish it had stayed in Canada, but that, I'm afraid, is about all I know about it.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
And yeah, I think you should mark it in your diary that this is the date that you interviewed a future Prime Minister of Canada.
Think about it.
And I'd like to wish Gordon well. The only thing is, I worked for his dad a few years ago, around the 1950s, and I think if he had taken charge like the old bull of the woods, I think he would have made the Liberal Party a viable force again in British Columbia. And I would like to make one...
That's nice. He would certainly have made it loud, wouldn't he?
Yeah, it will be a viable force again in British Columbia, too.
Listen, are you bilingual?
Just one question.
We've got to know this. If he's going to be Prime Minister, he must answer this question in French.
I just asked...
Vous parlez français, monsieur?
If Van der Zalm...
I'm rusty. Very rusty.
You can't speak French.
I'm very rusty.
How can you ever be the Prime Minister of this country? You can.
Well, you know, I'm not running for the job. I'm just saying I can speak rusty French.
And I'd like to ask him just one short question. If there was, in any short forthcoming election, he had anything to do with candidates on the West Coast, would he ever allow Van der Zalm or McGeer to run as a Liberal federal candidate?
Well, the only people who decide on candidates are constituency associations. I would be surprised if they could get a nomination.
Thank you. One more short segment with Gordon. I can't let him go yet. This is quite good fun. After all, he's going to be Prime Minister of Canada someday. I'll be long gone, but you never know. Ready for some more compliments?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Jack and Gordon, I'd like to say I congratulate Gordon on going to Ottawa. I think he's done an excellent job in BC. He's been a sane, sound, sensible character in the legislature, and I supported him over the years. Unfortunately, in this next federal election, I'm going to have to vote Conservative, but if Joe Clark doesn't do a job, the Liberals will be back in about 5 years. So, Gordon, get ready for that time. You're a good economist, and I think you make a lot of sense, and I hope that you'll represent the West, and don't pull your punches with the Prime Minister in respect to the English-French question.
Thank you. Don't need to answer. Cranbrook.
Good morning, Jack. I
Morning.
like your new music.
It's good, isn't it? I like the new music, too.
Right.
The other was kind of funereal. Funereal.
Uriel, I think.
Funereal.
I'd like to congratulate Mr. Gibson on his decision. I think he'll lend a little credibility to the federal scene. I'd like to ask him if he thinks he will be helping to form policy, and if he does, what are his views on capital punishments?
Well, my job is not really a policy one. That's up to the elected members and the ministers. My job is a party one at the moment. However, I will be seeking election, and so I'm quite happy to tell you my views on capital punishment. In Canada in 1979, I'm opposed to it. I am also, however, a very strong believer, and this is one of the reasons I gave for saying I wanted to go into the federal field when I announced last fall that I was leaving the provincial. I am a very strong believer in some elements of direct democracy in our society, as they have in many of the American states, the Proposition 13 type thing. And I think we should have on our books laws which would allow people, if they feel strongly enough about things like capital punishment, and it's clear that many Canadians do, to demand a public vote on it.
And that would become law through the House of Commons? Oh, Trudeau gave us this line a couple of months ago, didn't he?
What he said was specifically that he himself would not put the thing to a referendum, but he would give consideration to the kind of a law which would allow a sufficient number of people as signatories to demand a referendum. And I think we need that kind of safety valve in our society.
What you're saying
you can't
is
have
that
government by
I myself as an
referendum.
MP, you're saying I myself as an MP would not vote for, not advocate capital punishment, but when I so instructed by a national referendum on laid down rules on people participation and they voted for it, I would then pass the appropriate law. Is that correct?
The referendum itself would pass the law.
Penticton.
Good morning.
Morning.
First of all, I'd like to compliment Mr. Gibson on his decision. I will say one thing. I believe he's the only Liberal that I would ever vote for.
He's the only Liberal in BC, in the House.
He was the only one that
Provincial.
I've ever considered
Provincial.
voting for in the last election. I have a couple of questions for him.
Keep him short.
One, we have a Channel Parkway here, which is approximately $1 million worth of work, which they advertise as creating jobs, yet none of them have gone to Penticton residents who never had a job. The contractors from here who got contracts there already had their men, and the others have been brought in from different parts of the province. And the other thing, I will be leaving the province to go to Saskatchewan to work due to not being able to get a job here. And if Mr. Bennett is really willing to give out these shares in the corporation that he's talking about, I think I should be entitled to my shares. I've lived here for about 5 years, and I will not be here on BC Day, so we will find out whether it's
As long as you're here to apply for them and it is your intention to return to British Columbia after a period outside the province working, you will be entitled to them.
I see.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very
Bye.
much.
You don't mind me giving the answers?
No.
Because obviously I'm not rushing back and forward to Ottawa. I know what's going on in BC. See? Where am I going?
What kind of talk is that? I try and keep up too.
It's just a cheap shot, Gordon. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, gentlemen. And I wonder why it is that our best MLAs have to find greener pastures in other fields. But and we haven't found out about whether the holder of proxies for 95 bearer shares will be sufficient to go to meetings of the resource.
No, there will not be.
First of all, let me say something about your first comment. The reason that I'm looking to Ottawa is I think that I can see some potential for advance there in the things that after 15 years involvement in the political system I believe so strongly in, which is essentially more control of the government by people, which means freedom of information laws, which means more power for our elected MPs rather than for the cabinet, and which means some elements of direct democracy. So those are my quick reasons there, and I believe in them very strongly, and I believe in the Prime Minister very strongly. Now, as to the question of voting rights at that meeting, these are going to be bearer shares, and I say that anybody who shows up at that meeting with a certificate for 5 shares in their hand, I think they should have the right to vote, but at a very minimum, they should have the right to ask questions of directors.
I think it's 100 registered shares.
Yeah, you must have 100 registered shares to vote under the current rules, but they haven't made the asking questions rules yet. And at a very minimum, every British Columbian should have a right to be at that meeting and say, are you doing this right or wrong?
You don't have to be a shareholder of any kind to be nominated as a director. I know that much. That may be bad or it may be good. But back to your political future. I remember you saying in Victoria that you would only go into federal politics if you got certain assurances that certain changes were going to be made. Something to that effect. Am I correct?
Yes.
Constitutional ideas, etc. You obviously have had these assurances.
I'm satisfied that the flexibility is there, the progress is being made. In the speech from the throne, there was a guarantee of a freedom of information law, which is very important. The proposals with respect to the Constitution do shift more power to Parliament.
Fair enough. You answered the question. Otherwise, you go on for 10 minutes.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Morning.
Morning.
I was wondering, Mr. Gibson, could you tell us the little people how and when and where we're going to be able to apply for these shares?
Ma'am, I've done several programs on it. Mr. Gibson's here on a specific topic. It will be widely advertised. Credit unions, trust companies, banks. You'll get a form. You'll have to go and identify yourself with 2 of 3 pieces of acceptable identification. You will fill it in on behalf of yourself and your children. You'll send them, and you'll get them on August the 6th, God, to the post office willing. We've done that a dozen times, ma'am. I didn't want to direct. I just wanted to see. Do you want to say anything about Gibson short and sweet?
Yeah, Mr. Gibson.
What's short and sweet?
Yeah, I missed the interview in the beginning. You probably answered the question already, but what exactly does the national director do, and who was the previous director of the Liberal Party?
You did miss the interview at the beginning.
Yeah, I did.
For the last few months, there's been an acting national director, Mr. Gordon Ashworth of British Columbia.
Oh, yeah,
who's done a very fine job, and he's now executive secretary of the party. Previous to that, it was Jerry Robinson, who's also now in British Columbia. What the national director does, essentially, is act as a servant of the national executive of the party, of the leader of the party, of the campaign committee, and so on.
Good job description. Last call. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Mr. Gibson. I was intrigued with the idea of what you said about the sale of the BRIC shares was evidently previously suggested by you.
Yes.
Do you mean that you formally proposed that in the legislature?
I proposed it in the second reading debate in August of 1977. I forget the exact date, but...
You suggested that shares in BRIC should be distributed free?
Yes, it's in Hansard.
It's in the record, eh?
Yes, it is.
Oh, well, I certainly wish you luck in Ottawa, and I'm glad that you're going to be coming back, and I know that you won't forget about British Columbia.
I sure won't.
Thank you very much. People know by the way I've been joshing you that, and one seldom says this, I have a fair amount of respect for you as a politician. I'm not quite so sure if I will have the same respect for you as a political hack on Pierre's staff. My thanks to Gordon Gibson. Next, we're going to talk to Tonie Nathan. Libertarian Party, United States, quite an influential group. Don't quite know what they mean. A little touch of anarchy in it, I think. I hope so. We certainly could do with a touch of anarchy in this continent. Without terrorism, that is, of course. Tonie Nathan next. Tonie Nathan, are you from Eugene, Oregon?
That's where I'm from.
Practically a neighbor. So before we get to this business of husbands and wife and rape, I think you should answer a few questions. Why, and I'm reading through your own press stuff, why are you part of American political history?
Because I'm the first woman in history to have an electoral college vote, which means a vote as Vice President of the United States. I got it in 1972 when an elector refused to vote for Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew and voted instead for my running mate and me.
Oh, explain that. An elector is a person who receives his position in the college after a certain number of votes have been cast in a state. Is that right?
Right. Every state has so many electors, and they really cast the vote for president. People don't vote directly for the president.
And do you know
of the United
which
States.
elector that was who cast the vote for you?
Yes, his name was Roger McBride, and he was a Virginia elector.
So when he got to the position of having to cast his vote, in fact, for the president, he thought, I'm not going to vote for Nixon, I'll vote for Tonie Nathan.
Right. I think he didn't know me personally, but I think he was voting for the Libertarian Party and the principles that he understood that we stood for. And he voted for both the presidential candidate and myself. And
next question. Of what organization are you presently the president?
I'm president of the Association of Libertarian Feminists, which is...
Oh, you advocate daycare and that kind of thing?
No, I don't.
Oh. You want the government to look after things for women while they're out to work?
No, we differ from every other women's organization in that we don't believe in special privilege for women. We believe...
Oh, welcome to the program. You mean they should stand on their own feet?
Right. We believe in individual rights. We believe people should accept the responsibility as well as the benefits of being self-sufficient and independent, economically and psychologically.
Now, you're from Oregon. Oh, the Libertarian Party. Put it in a couple of well-chosen phrases for me. What is it? I mean,
Jack,
is this a kind of... No, you tell me.
Jack, it's the fastest growing political party throughout the world. In the United States, it's now the third largest party. We were first on the ballot in '72 in just 2 states, and at the last general election, we were on the ballot in 32 states, and we hope to make all 50 states
All right,
in 1980.
If you were knocking on my door, why would I vote for the Libertarians? After all, you know, I'm a small L, liberal, left of center kind of person who believes in human dignity, human rights, and a fair amount of egalitarianism and equal opportunity and all that jazz.
You take out
education for all.
take out that fair amount of egalitarianism and you're a libertarian. We don't believe in equalizing society. We believe in individual rights. We believe that people are different.
You believe we're overgoverned.
Oh, and how?
You would clean out the feather-bedded civil services.
Well, we would get government completely out of the economy. Completely.
Free enterprises.
Absolutely. No one, anyone should be able to trade with anyone they wish. It should be a very voluntary society. We don't believe in forcing some people's values on other people.
Live or die on your own merits, either as a business or an individual.
Right.
Medicare, of course. You must have Medicare for everybody.
Oh, absolutely not. That's what hurts. Absolutely not. People have to take
But
care
in the United States, you've still got great class injustice. The wealthy get great treatment. The poor can't even afford to buy the blood after an accident on the highway.
I don't think that's so. Our poor have
I'm
practically
exaggerating.
disappeared. Our poor have practically disappeared in the United States. Our standard of living is extremely high. Some of the problems that we've got in medical care are due to the entry of the government into it.
Doctors fiddling it.
Well, government causes malinvestment, it causes malinterest, it penalizes incentive, it penalizes creativity, invention, it stifles individual initiative.
You wouldn't build public housing for the poor to wipe out ghettos.
No, it isn't necessary. The poor are interested in improving themselves, and given the opportunity, if we get all these governmental regulations out of the way, people will improve themselves. They always have.
You're anti-union.
No, not anti-union. People have the right to unionize. We're anti-government enforced union.
A little bit wishy-washy, though.
Well, a lot of laws tell the force management to give in to unions or allow union special privilege. There's nothing wrong with people unionizing.
If I saw your principles that you've expressed in paper right now, I'd say you're a right-winger of the worst order.
Oh, absolutely not, because we're opposed to all victimless crimes. We were opposed.
Such as? What's a victimless crime?
Any crime where two people decide to do something, or a person decides to do something which does not involve anyone else, doesn't victimize anyone else, like prostitution, any kind of drug use,
Doesn't matter.
ownership
We can
of
all
gold.
go about bombed if we like. Eh?
Certainly, as long as you don't hurt anyone. You can't steal to get your drugs.
You can't fly a plane, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Or drive a car, hopefully.
Hopefully.
And it wouldn't encourage the widespread use of these wonderful euphoric substances, would it?
Well, actually, it would discourage it if it was on the free market. A lot of the incentive for providing drugs to the people is because of huge profit.
Yeah, we've been through that one 1,000 times. We'll just drop that one. Decriminalization of prostitution?
Oh, absolutely. Why shouldn't two people be able to make an agreement to go to bed together? Who
Whether
does it
or not
hurt?
they're judges.
Whether
That's
or
a
not
local
they're
joke,
judges.
a local joke.
Right, right.
Providing, of course, the gal he's been to bed with isn't up the next day looking for favors, should that happen.
Well, that would, I think there'd be some evidence that they got them. Everyone looks for favors, perhaps, but...
You still go after the pimps in the prostitution business.
Well, not necessarily.
No, you
It depends. What?
Organized whorehouses.
No, it depends. If there's a business for it, and I
don't
think there's a very
understand
limited
you.
market.
You're a feminist, and yet you are in favor of women, misguided, underprivileged women, exploiting themselves for the purpose of monetary sex.
They may be stupid and they may be misguided, but the point is that the law doesn't protect them. Right now, pimps beat up women, they steal, and they steal from them, and the woman can't go to the law. The woman can't go to court and ask for justice and say, keep this man from taking my money, keep him from beating me up. So the prostitute is exploited by the laws, not by the people she's involved with.
Oh, come off it. She's
Well, where
exploited
does she
perhaps
go?
by
Where does she
both. I mean, these weak women who are used by the pimps on a mass scale, and we've got scores of them in Vancouver,
What about
you
the
well know.
What about the weak women that are used by their husbands and raped and assaulted by husbands?
I want to take my breath, take a break, and come back, and we'll talk about the Oregon laws and that celebrated rape case with
What
Tonie
happened?
Nathan. On every newscast, television newscast in the country a couple of weeks ago, you saw the dramatic story, husband charged with rape. And before the trial, this being the way they do things in the United States, you saw the wife being interviewed and the reasons for the rape charge, etc. And then we came to the trial and we were subjected to other harrowing processes, this poor downbeaten creature. Lo and behold, he's acquitted. Now it's been announced they're getting back together again. Sounds like the greatest public relations gimmick to create a phony issue that I've ever come across in my life. But I'm not going to put that to you. I'm going to ask you about the Oregon law and this situation? I shall try not to interrupt you while you tell me.
Well, Oregon is very liberal and very progressive in their laws that they have regarding women. I'm going to talk about this at UBC tomorrow afternoon at 12:30.
I'll give you a plug later.
All right.
Okay. Tell me the rape case.
I think that this law is a justified law. It occurs
What
in
does
about
it
4 other
say?
states. It says that a woman can bring charges of rape, which is sexual assault, even though she's married. Up to now, if a woman were married, the courts did not consider rape a valid charge. Now, sexual assault takes place within marriage. It takes place in all kinds of situations. It is assault. It's not sex we're talking about. We're talking about assault, which happens to be linked with sex. And it seems to me that a woman should have defense from assault, from bodily injury, as well as whether she's married or not. I think the most important thing about this case is that, first of all, it gave some widespread publicity to the fact that there was a case to be made for women being assaulted. Second of all, I think it's important to get out to the working man or public, the average person, the average man who thinks he can go home and beat up his old lady, as it were, and that's just par for the course. The women expect it and the men expect it. There's a whole psychology involved in this, and we have to change these kinds of views. We have to make men realize that they shouldn't put a finger on a woman without her permission. It's her body. She's an individual. She has the right to be free from any kind of coercive act.
Except that she's gone into a contract, to be very chauvinistic about it, if she went through a form of marriage in which sexual intercourse is an implied condition of the deal.
Yes, but I think that that's a good point, because it depends on what the contractual obligation was. Libertarians don't believe that it's necessary for the state to get involved in this. We don't believe it's necessary to have marriage laws. We think people should be able to make contractual relationships. They live together with certain implied or explicit relationships.
And no legal responsibility?
What do you mean legal responsibility?
child.
When has the law ever been able to make a man support his children or
Many a time.
Oh, it's
Many
very
a
difficult.
time.
Very
Money,
difficult.
The local courts collect something like $7 or $8 million a year out of paychecks for women who have claimed that they've been deserted by their husband of whatever reason. And that system, in fact, works quite well.
Well, any collection agency could do that. It doesn't require laws.
You got to be joking.
No, I'm not
Collection
joking.
agency.
If there's an agreement, if there's a contract, it isn't necessary for the state to enter into it.
In other words, you don't believe in the formal establishment of the family. You don't believe that the family is one of the really important units in a free society.
I think it is one of the most important units. I happen to be married and have 3 children myself, been married all my life.
And you went through a form of marriage?
Yes, I did. But still, no matter whether you go through a formal marriage or not, I think the important thing is for the 2 people that are entering into marriage to understand exactly what they're getting into. Will they share money? Will they have agreement about sex? Now, I wouldn't get married if I knew that my husband could attack me anytime he chose, if that were a part of the marriage. I think most women assume that the husband is going to treat them affectionately and lovingly.
We're talking about normal people in normal circumstances. By this kind of thing, you will have created a monster with neurotic couples going to the law, and you're the one that doesn't want laws, you want less interference, on every conceivable phony issue about undesired sex. You can see that that could create a whole monster.
Well, you're right about the law. I mean, I'm a libertarian, so I don't think that a lot of our laws answer very many problems. What I do think the law is doing in this case is focusing attention on the great degree of rape that occurs within marriage, on sexual assaults. Rape is on the increase everywhere in the world, and I think that people need to know.
Rape within marriage, total lack of witnesses in all normal circumstances, right? How the devil can you prove it in any case? Why was he acquitted? Because there was no independent evidence. It's a question of who do you believe. What is the difference between sexual intercourse and assault?
It's independent. Oh, I hope there's a big difference.
No, but you're saying that sexual intercourse is assault.
No, I'm not. In this particular,
unconsented sexual intercourse within marriage is assault.
The woman can't simply allege this. She has to show evidence. In this case, there was evidence presented, black eyes, bruises.
Well, that's an assault case. That's all it was an assault case. It wasn't to do with sex at all. It was only an assault case.
Right. I don't think you try a man because he has sex. I think you try a man because he has forcible sex,
was he charged
which is
with
assault.
Rape? Was he charged with rape?
Yes, he was charged with rape.
Stupid.
That's what it is.
He should have been charged with assault.
Well, I think that the word rape is not useful. I think it should be called sexual assault. It's not the sex that we're complaining about. It's the forced
That's right.
sex.
So back to the media. The whole of the world everywhere in the English-speaking and non-English-speaking world, in the free country, they saw a husband charged with rape. In fact, you and I know, and I suspected it all the way along, that the husband was not charged with rape, he was charged with assault, and the supporting evidence was black and blue, bruises, doctor's treatment and pictures, as in any family husband and wife assault case.
Jack, let me ask you a question. How would you define rape?
I wouldn't charge a husband with rape, but I'd certainly charge him with assault if he beat the devil out of his wife.
Well, I think that's what they were doing.
That's what the whole thing was about. It's been a phony issue.
Well, the point is that if there's sex involved in it, it becomes then rape. But this is a technicality.
Drop the word rape. That gave a total misinterpretation to the situation. It was a family dispute, and he beat her up. And he was found not guilty because the evidence wasn't strong enough to support it.
Well, I don't think there was any question that he beat her up.
Are we not agreed that the use of rape there was bad, misleading, and will lead to all kinds of complications which need not have? If it had been husband charged with assault during sexual intercourse or whatever, wouldn't have got a single solitary headline, not even in Eugene, Oregon.
I think the thing that I'm trying to bring to your attention is that rape is sexual assault. Rape is sexual assault.
Okay, drop the word rape.
Yeah, you can drop the word rape.
Any
That's
man
what
who beats up his wife in the course of anything should be charged with assault.
All right. The point is, a man should not. Let's agree with this. We can't prove it, but
What
a
do you
man
want
should not forcibly force sexual attentions on his wife. I don't think that's implied marriage. I think a woman has a right to resist a man if she's not interested in sex. And the point is that a woman can't very well prove that she didn't want sex if there isn't some sort of assault or beating going along with it.
The whole thing is a storm in a stupid little Oregon teacup.
Yeah, but let's look at the point that we're trying to get over to the public, and that is that men should not assault women. They shouldn't have sex with women if women don't want sex with them.
I'm also in favor of
I don't care if it's in
motherhood,
marriage
honesty,
or not.
decency, everything else.
Women are terribly victimized, you know, and the main object of the...
Come off it, women are...
Terribly
Nowadays?
victimized. Oh, nowadays more so than ever,
How?
I think. Because
We've
we're
got
learning.
thousands of token women in jobs nowadays in this province, many of whom can't cope with them.
They're still not
We've
getting
got this
equal
great
pay.
problem of female police officers and very nervous policemen who don't know what's going to happen the next time they meet a gun. They're more concerned with protecting their pretty little partner, properly concerned, than in dealing with the situation. Do you know the amount of trouble that's been caused by this so-called egalitarianism and giving women specified jobs in police forces?
All right, I told you I'm opposed to the egalitarianism. I would agree with you that in
Phony
many cases
baloney.
women should not be in these type of jobs. If they want to be and if they qualify, all right. But I don't think that most women qualify in the area of physical strength.
That's right.
And I personally would rather have a male cop come to protect me
Damn right.
than a woman cop.
I mean, you're going to have frightened politicians now putting 18.5% of women in fire departments, and some little slip of a thing weighing 95 pounds is going to try and lift me out of a window. Keep it well away. I think it's so stupid as to be unbelievable.
I think you've got a point there. I think that whether the woman is a cop or a soldier or a firewoman or whatever, it depends on her ability. If
There
she's
are one or
6 foot,
two women, one or two women
right,
who could do it.
right.
But even at that,
if she's got the ability, she shouldn't be prevented by law.
But I'm not going to go to the taxpayers' expense of putting in separate and equal facilities in a fire hall with the wives picketing outside, preventing them from coming to fire.
Well, libertarians wouldn't want to use taxes to fund fire
But
protection.
you know, this equality, egalitarianism in public service is a piece of nonsense.
I agree with you.
Good. You're going to talk to Tonie, Nathan, and me if you like. I'm in a very pleasant mood this morning. After this break. Tonie Nathan, Association of Libertarian Feminists, not Libertarian Feminists, is it? Yeah.
Libertarian feminists, right, we're different.
Libertarian Party of the United States. Good right-wing free enterprise party.
Not right-wing.
No wing. Go ahead to Tonie. Go ahead to Tonie.
You know, I listened to the lady this morning talk about rape and marriage. I agree with you. Rape should be taken to the law. Sexual assault or human abuse of any kind, it should be stopped. But I just wonder how much of that really takes place compared to the normal people. There's a great amount of it, I know. But what law could be passed that would allow a woman to deny sex for whatever wish she wants, at the same time have her husband charged with adultery when he goes out to try and relieve that tension?
Good point.
Yes, yes.
Of course, you don't have any moral standards like that in your party.
We definitely have moral standards. We're the only party that bases our whole party philosophy on a moral principle that no person has the right to initiate force on any other person. And neither does the government, neither does any group of persons. This is why we're so opposed to rape. It's an assault or it's an infringement of rights by one person against another. I agree with the caller that we really can't have any laws that deal with this very personal area. But the Association of Libertarian Feminists, for example, is an educational group, and what we're trying to do is make women realize that they don't have to accept unwanted attentions or abuse, especially abuse, because there's so many battered women. There's more and more information coming out that women are badly battered, that this rubs off on the children learn violence. So I would say that it's an educational effort.
It doesn't all come from the men, though, I'll tell you.
It has to originally come from men.
Why?
Because men have the ability, the strength, to inflict their views on other people. Men are brought up to hit the other guy on the chin when they don't like what he says. Women don't have this capability. Women are taught to receive the abuse, to get by, to find some other ways of solving their problems.
Enough.
Oh, no, this isn't enough.
Do you know how many times the police are called to assaults and the poor woman's been battered to devil, and she may or may not have been, and they will never follow through with the legal proceedings? They invariably withdraw the charges.
Most of the time they do withdraw the charges.
And the police get fed up going.
And this is due to two things. One, that the woman thinks the man does have a right to beat her up. Second of all, he's the provider of the money, and she's afraid, and the kids. Many women get married in high school or right out of high school. They've never held a job. They're absolutely dependent on these men, and they find themselves in a situation where they receive beatings.
Just a minute. That's enough. Prince George.
Yes, I'm calling from Prince George. I just wanted to let you know my views on it. Now, I personally have been through court, through divorce, and have 2 children, and tried to get maintenance for my husband. Now, 4 years in court, 4 years, and I've had 2 payments. And the hell I had to go through to get that payment wasn't worth a powder to go to where.
I know it well, ma'am.
Pardon?
I know your problem well. Maybe partly the court, partly the lawyer, if you had one, or the prosecutor with the Crown. Or maybe your husband's probably dodging and he's already living with another woman who's got 5 kids.
No, that wasn't the case. He doesn't live with another woman, nothing like that. Now, they knew where he was. He went to court about 5, 6.
Don't need no details, ma'am. We know it happens and we have sympathy for you, don't we?
Yeah, yes. And that's all I got to say is that keep the good work up.
Thank you very much.
You know, I'd like
Castlegar, I can't hear you. Nelson. You wanted to say something first.
I'd like to say something. The issue is more than, certain cases. There's justice and injustices. Men get beaten up by women, too.
I know.
But I think the most important thing is that if we don't get people and children and situations, family situations, where people respect each other, if we don't learn that we should never physically assault anyone in any kind of a situation that is never justified, we're never going to get rid of war. We're never going to get rid of aggression, and we're always going to have people saying, if I can make this person do it, I'm going to do it.
Well, don't you think that's the human nature, the nature of the human being, that we never will get rid of aggression, we never will get rid of war?
I don't think
that
it's
we
the nature
will come
of
back
the
to
human
the
being.
survival of the fittest one day. If you won out and you managed to wipe out all these welfare programs, all these mothers' allowances in various forms, and all the daycare, we'd go back to the survival of the fittest, and we'd have riots in the streets today.
I don't agree that man is by nature an aggressive animal that wants to fight. No, I think
We're
man is
naked
irrational.
apes, and you know that.
No, I don't agree.
Men and women are naked apes.
People are rational. They have choices. They can make choices. They can make decisions. And people should see that the only kind of decent life they can hope for in this world is when they respect each other and they deal with each other in voluntary ways, that they can cooperate with each other, that they have something to gain in a social...
Let me speak to Nelson. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. I would like to say that this lady's political ideas on free enterprise are like a breath of fresh air. And secondly, I would like to ask her about the reversal of this law. What about a female or a wife's assault on a husband? Now, I know that men don't usually report something like this as against the macho image, but I'm sure it happens. I'll hang up. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I had a mother that threw China at my father, and he was a very peaceful, gentle person. So, I mean, I know what she means, that she didn't really beat him up or anything of that sort. But the same principle applies. Individuals should respect each other, and what other disagreements they have should be worked out in some other manner than physically assaulting each other. That is the ape.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think this rape case in the United States is one of the biggest political liberation stunt for women that ever produced in the world.
Excellent call.
Well, I don't know if it was or not. You know, I think that the women's
Well, you and
groups
I
in Oregon,
analyzed it very well, and we agreed that it was a phony.
I don't know if it was a phony. I don't know that for a fact.
If it was assault, charge him.
I think the law is justified. Well, it was assault. She was beaten.
She was acquitted. He was acquitted. She wasn't beaten. He walked out of the court a free man.
Yes,
right?
yes, he did. But
There was
I
no
think
case.
I wouldn't say there's no case. What they felt was there wasn't sufficient evidence to meet the requirements of the law.
The same
And
happens to swindlers who walk away with $10 billion. They walk out acquitted, and you can't say they're crooks. You cannot say he's a brute who raped his wife, because he didn't. The courts, your courts, found so.
Whether they found it so or not, courts make mistakes.
Oh, come off it, ma'am. The man was acquitted. He's clean as a whistle.
One of the things about the United States is a person is innocent until proven guilty,
Same
and the
here.
jury said there wasn't sufficient evidence
Right.
without a question of a doubt. But there
That's
was
all
evidence.
you need.
There was evidence.
No, reasonable doubt. I mean, after all, for all I know
right.
about this woman, she may have been the world's worst nag, poorest cook, most difficult person who ever lived.
He still didn't have a chance to even lay a finger on her. He could have left.
Fair
he could
enough,
have
but
divorced her.
The jury may have thought, thank God he gave it a little bit of a beating.
Yeah, well, that's the trouble, that kind of an attitude, and I really resent that. I really resent that. I think it's time for men, such as yourself, that's an opinion leader, to say men should not beat up women.
Of
I don't
course
think it's
they
funny.
shouldn't beat up
I don't
women.
think it's funny,
It's not
Jack.
the least bit funny. But we've established quite clearly that this Oregon rape case charge was a phony.
Whether it was a phony or not, there
And
was a
the
lot
law,
of laughter
ipso
around here
facto,
just a minute, because most of the men and some of the women in this area think it's perfectly all right to beat up your wife once in a while
John,
if she opens her
you
mouth
laugh
too much.
again, John, you're
I
in
don't
trouble.
agree with that.
Here, here.
And I suggest that every woman that doesn't like what her husband is doing, when he gets physical and abuses her, do something about it. And I hope you get a law here in Canada that allows women to charge men for sexual
They can charge
abuse.
them right now.
Good.
But it's under the Criminal Code of Canada, and it's for assault.
Well, that's fine.
Where are we? Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nathan, do the Libertarians favor the abolishment of the Securities Exchange Commission? And then second, would you discuss a little further your the Libertarian viewpoint of managing fire protection as well as police protection?
What do you mean about that? Don't get your last question.
Well, I understood from her last statement before your break that she would not spend tax dollars on fire protection. Well, how are we going to have fire protection?
No, that wasn't, she didn't say that. I was making a remark about special, equal, and separate accommodation for tiny, little 4-foot women firemen.
I do happen to agree with the caller, though. Libertarians do not think that any taxes should be taken from people at all. Taxation is extortion by the government of people's personal money. People own their own lives, they own their money. No taxes.
No income
Why?
tax.
What makes you think people wouldn't pay for fire protection if the government didn't furnish it?
Because we're all so pampered and spoiled and creatures of the state that we expect the facilities to be there to be paid out of general tax revenue.
Well, the states encourage that, and for years we've looked to government to do everything for us, but we can do these things
How about
for
roads?
ourselves.
How about roads?
Oh, you know, before there were any roads, in Oregon at least, we had private individuals building covered bridges and extracting tolls.
Answer the question,
reason-
ma'am. What
toll
about
bridge.
roads?
Toll roads.
Toll roads, toll
Right,
bridges, build your own
Yeah.
fire hall. What about hospitals?
Oh, same thing.
What about
Private hospitals are better than public hospitals most of the time. They give better service. They offer cheaper rates. Right in Eugene, we've got
When I made
private
the little
hospital
crack
competing
about
with the public
anarchy,
hospital.
when I made the little crack about anarchy, I wasn't that far off, was I?
No, you weren't, but we're peaceful anarchists. Every libertarian signs a statement that they will not advocate the initiation of force. So we're anarchists in the sense that perhaps Thomas Jefferson was, in that we think government governs best, that governs least. Now, if government has a function, it is a policeman. If it has one function, it is to make sure to protect the individual against violations by criminals, by other people.
But if
Government's
you
like a
have no
referee.
laws, you have no criminals.
Oh, you should have laws. You should have laws, because how do you know where the wrongs and the rights are if you don't somehow codify them, explain them? But first of all, Americans believe and Canadians do too, in individual rights. We believe that we grant our consent to the state to do certain things. We don't believe the state gives us the right to exist. We're not serfs and peons belonging to the state. But I want to say something. Government, it really should be like a policeman at a football game, a referee at a football game. He blows the whistle when the rules are broken, and the rules are made by all of us, but he doesn't quarterback the plays, he doesn't call the plays, he doesn't make the rules, he just blows his whistle. Well, government isn't just blowing its whistle now. It's taking our money, it's telling us where we can go to school, what kind of an education we can have, who we can go to bed with, how old we have to be before we can get married, what kind of doctors we can accept, who can practice medicine, all these things.
I think I'll join your party.
I think you should.
Webster and Tonie Nathan.
Would she discuss?
No, you finished that. Tonie is certainly different, I'll tell you. Libertarian from the States, former vice presidential candidate. She's speaking tomorrow at 12:30 at UBC. Where at UBC? Oh, in the sub, 205, 12:30 tomorrow, Friday. And tonight at 8 o'clock on the Rembrandt in Vancouver. Might be good fun. Phone calls, 5. Go ahead, please.
We all make the rules, and if elected on a general mandate of giving control of the people's own affairs back to the people, and say 95% of Americans wanted heroin or public nudity or any other individual freedom illegal, would you enact such a restrictive law?
A restrictive law? I don't understand the question.
You mean such an untrammeled law? What you said was if 95% wanted heroin or public body houses, is that what you're asking?
If they didn't want it.
If they didn't want it, yes.
All right, let me go into that a little bit.
Why
The
not answer
assumption
the
of the
question?
speaker, because he's making an assumption that if allowed, 95% of the people would use heroin. I doubt that.
No, other way around. He's saying if the people voted in the plebiscite that they wanted a restriction on heroin, marijuana, and body houses, brothels, would you then enact that as a basic law for your policemen?
No, because what we're saying is that that the dissenter has to be protected, even if it's one person in 1,000 and they are doing something that injures no one else, such as injecting themselves with heroin. They're not stealing or they're not harassing anyone. Then that person has a right to do what he wants with his own body, with his own life, as long as he's not bothering others. Let me point out to the person that if 95% of the people said that they did think everyone should be injected with heroin or tranquilizers or whatever the state decides you ought to have, I wouldn't vote for that either. I think that once you grant the state the right to decide your values, to decide what kind of a life you should have, you're in big trouble, and that's where we are now.
Logical. Okay.
Well, if people are free to walk around nude, despite the fact that 95% of the people are offended by it.
No, doesn't matter.
Make the rules.
Your heroin point was a better one. She answered it well. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask your guest if a person gives his whole paycheck to his wife and whatnot, and whether they work or both or not, if he was the less aggressive type and needed something that she always had a headache, would you give him $50 to go down and get a hooker and let him back in the house?
Well, I think if we didn't have the social ostracism we have now, she might. You know, people get married for a variety of reasons, and I'm afraid a lot of women get married not for sex, not really for love, although that's what originally attracts the man, but because they want to share his paycheck. If he finds that she's a good housewife and she takes care of his children, but she's not interested in sex, it might be that he should take his business somewhere else.
Thank you, sir. I don't want another question from you. It was a funny question. Fair enough, really, in a way. I mean, he's taking the mickey out of you. That's what he's doing.
Right.
Because the Oregon rape cases are phony. Go ahead, please.
Jack,
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed in you.
Ah, good jump.
Yes, I am. Well, how can you possibly think that there is no rape involved in forced sexual relations, whether you're married or single? How can you possibly believe that that isn't a sexual assault and therefore rape?
I'm so brainwashed about...
You're a man of my age, and I just can't believe this.
Unwanted sexual intercourse in a marriage is obviously some type of assault. How in the devil could you police that or make it illegal. You can't. That's my attitude, madam, whether or not you're older or younger than me.
But if it is forced sexual relations and a woman is beaten in order to force
If she is beaten, she has a case under Canadian law right now.
I think
only for physical assault, Jack, not for rape or sexual
Correct.
by a woman, whether she or a man, whether she's married or unmarried.
If he breaks her jaw and leaves her battered and bruised and has a previous record, he will go to jail.
She's not allowed to sue for the fact that he forcibly makes her...
She can leave, many's the time, and listen, I'm a living expert in this. People have come to me over dozens of years, and I'm talking about not scores, but hundreds of women who say to me, I'm in fear of my life. My husband is a brute. He beats me half to death. He treats my children like animals. The police tell me that they can't do anything until he kills me. I say, madam, if you are in fear of your life or being beaten again, or in fear of your children's lives, that's a paramount consideration, and there's only one thing you can do. Gather your children, clothes on your back, and go, Tony wouldn't approve of this, to the local office to which I would direct them and say, I cannot go back home, I am at your mercy, and they will give you some temporary help until you manage to stand on your own feet. When a woman is in fear of her life, there is only one thing to do, regardless of economics or paycheck, grab the kids, get up and get out.
I agree with you. And then we have Mr. Van der Zam who would tell...
Oh, forget Van der Zam. He's not involved in that at all, name of goodness. Woman, you really annoy me. Somebody on here, Linda.
Jack, I'd like to comment on that for just a moment.
I think we've got a break coming up.
All right.
How much have we got? 10 seconds. Tony Nathan, UBC, tomorrow, sub 205 at 12:30 tonight at the Rembrandt Hotel. Thank you, Tony Nathan, Libertarian.
Pleasure.
What, Linda, is for tomorrow?
Tomorrow you have Dave Barrett, hopefully Otto Lang.
Oh, that's the big press conference today on...
A few minutes it'll be on.
It'll be on in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And Otto Lang we're chasing, and Broadbent we're chasing, and Brian's got a good one up his sleeve on why we can't fire him. That's
right.
a good one. That's already done. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. precisely.